Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We have the great good fortune this week to begin together the book of Bamidbar. We are beginning the book of Numbers. So we are in Numbers. We're going to be in Numbers chapter 1. But it's not the beginning of the book is not a terribly exciting, if I can say that. It's not a terribly exciting set of texts, right? So because the book of Numbers, why is it called the book of Numbers? Because there's a census taken. Because the Israelites, remember, the book of Leviticus gets dropped in right after. You have Genesis, Exodus, and then you have Leviticus dropped in there. Numbers picks up from where Exodus ended. So all that stuff about the Mishkan, all that stuff about the priesthood, all that stuff is all in the book of Leviticus, but it's there's no time elapse in there. So the end of Exodus to beginning of Numbers is the storyline, is the, time moves on. In the book of Numbers, we are in the first 2 years of the journey from Egypt. This was supposed to, now that they've done the Mishkan, now that they built it, now that God's presence is there, now that they got that going, they're supposed to now move towards conquering the land of Israel, according to the mythology, right? Our sacred mythology. They are going to conquer the land of Israel, which means they have to be arrayed in battle formation, right? So part of this is about moving from the story of Revelation and all of that grooviness. It's now moving to arraying the folks for battle. See, Nick is already yawning. Like, really? Okay. Already yeah, this is not the most exciting stuff, Rabbi. Like, can we move on? Right. So the first 2 years in chapter 14 of this book, the Israelites will be condemned to die in the desert. Then we get a second census as they're ready to enter the land, because now they've had a 40-year delay. Once that decree happens, they have a 40-year delay, and that generation has to die. And then they take another census when the next generation is about to enter the land, right? Because they're going to have to do battle. So we have two censi, one now, and then one at the end of the book. So that's why it's called the book of Numbers. And then we get each tribe iterated by how many folks there are in that tribe. For the mythological number of 600,000, which is impossible to sustain a population that large in the wilderness, right? But we're staying in our willing suspension of disbelief, like we're staying in our sacred mythology. 600,000. So Aviva Zornberg talks about this. She says the book of Numbers is really the book of catastrophe. This is the book where once that decree happens in chapter 14, this generation, their only job is to die. That's their whole purpose. Their whole purpose is to die. So imagine what that's like, knowing that once the decree happens, they have no project. There's nothing for them to do except die. And so then numbering, in a way, that second census, numbering becomes about absence as well as about presence. Who's not here, right? To the last person that's not here is how long that process takes.
When did they know that they were going to die?
Chapter 14. Chapter 14. So the story of the scouts, right? That's the incident where the Israelites listen to the pessimistic scouts and don't listen to Joshua and Caleb. And that's the final straw. God has had it. And God's like, this people, they can't do it. and we're done. Y'all are going to drop, your carcasses will drop in this desert. So from then, anyone 20 years and older had to die. And that happened within that time frame, right? 38 years. It happens in 38 years. So it's like a hurried dying of a generation that disappears into the sand. So the book of Numbers is intense that way. And there's not a lot in those years. We don't get hardly anything from the 38 years. We get a bunch of stuff in the first 2 years. We get a bunch of stuff till Numbers 14. And then it kind of jumps. There's a couple of things, the rebellion of Korach, a couple of things like that. And then it jumps to the end of the desert period. It jumps to when they're about to take the land and the instructions they're getting there. So we get this 38-year kind of silence while a generation dies.
Well, they were living until they died.
They were living until they died. So existentially,
They had nothing. They had free time.
they had lots of free time to bring their sacrifices and do their thing. But, you can imagine, I mean, I like how Zornberg paints the poignancy of the pointlessness of that generation in the narrative, right? Like, we can imagine that each tribe and each clan and each family had their little routines, and they were preparing the next generation. But like on the grand scale, on the operatic, epic scale, this generation has nothing left to do after chapter 14 but die. And they need to do it quickly. They need to do it in 38 years. So imagine you're 25 years old when the decree happens. You've got, right? You're not going to live so very long. So the irony is that the generation that got to see all the miracles is the one that dies, is the one that disappears into the sands of the Midbar, into the sands of the wilderness. All right. So on that happy note, we will take up the book of Numbers. I have prepared a couple of visuals for y'all because you were so excited last week that all I need is a little reinforcement and I'm good to go. So we're going to look at the text we're in. We're going to start in Numbers 1. We're going to jump to Numbers 2 at some point. So we're going to start at the beginning of Numbers, chapter 1, verse 1. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe Bamidbar Sinai be'ohel moed. And so God is speaking to Moshe from the Ohel Moed, from the tent of meeting. And this is on the first day of the month, of the second month, in the second year from leaving Egypt. Right? All right. Number 2, verse 2. Se'u et rosh kol adat b'nei Yisrael lemishpachotam leveit avotam b'mispar shemot kol zachar legulgolotam. Lift up the head of every member of the community of Israel, which means count them. Lemishpachotam, by their family groups, meaning their clans. Leveit avotam, by the house of their ancestors. B'mispar shemot kol zachar, so we need the number, the number of all the guys who are 20 years old and older, because that's who's going to be your fighting force. So this is a military census. This is a census to figure out how large your army is. Okay? Mi ben asrim shana v'mala, in case you doubt me, from 20 years and up. Kol yetzei tzava, all who will go out in the tzava to be part of the army, be Yisrael, of Israel, tifkedu otam, you shall count them. But this word, tifkedu, this pei kuf dalid resh, pei kuf dalid pakad. So this is about having a role. This is about, so you give someone a job, essentially. You give someone a role. So even though it's a euphemism for counting, This is exactly opposite of what you would call counting that is dehumanizing. This is the exact opposite of that. Everybody counts. Everybody matters. Lift up the head of every Israelite. If you lift up someone's head, you by definition are looking them in the eye. So that phrase, that idiomatic expression about counting is the same insistence that this is not a numbering of human beings that is dehumanizing. It is, in fact, the opposite. Everyone has a role. Everybody has a job. And it's tafkid. That's exactly what it is. Tafkid is a job. So it's this old. So tafkid as task, as role, as job is this old. They know that usage here when they're using it to say counting. And I think it's really important that lots of commentators pick up on this. It's not just me, but lots of the commentary is because it's very easy to reduce people to numbers, as no people knows that better than we do who grew up looking at tattoos on arms. None of us, it's not lost on us. But it's interesting that it's in the language of Torah this early that you don't count people as numbers, that they're not just a mass. You count them out of love, which God does. That's the rabbis talk about us being Am Segula, God's precious, special people. Then if you have a collection, you count them, right? Am I right, Judith?
Yes.
Right? So if you've been to Judith's home, she has a fantastic collection of just about everything.
Only if there are two of them.
Although if there's two of them. And it covers every surface in the house. And so I can imagine, about how many plates you have, about how many dolls from, this country, about how many statues from representing this, you count what you love, right? You're paying attention to it. And it's either about out of preciousness, you want to know how many you have because you love them so much. And it's this sense of tafkid. It's this sense of everybody matters. Everybody has a role. And there is a dignity in that Torah really is about preserving.
Are the numbers on the arms, are they consecutive, the number of people? So the first person who had the tattoo put on his arm would be one.
That I don't know.
So those numbers, we don't know the significance.
I don't. I'm sure historians do, but it was way too dark for me.
Yes.
It was just way too dark for me to.
Whenever we do this piece, whenever we read this, I think about immigration and the dehumanizing word surge and
the word surge.
The word surge, and
yes,
because it's not individualized. It's just a mass.
Correct.
And we don't think of each individual person has a story and life and goals, and
it's a really good point.
Counting.
It's a really good point. Torah is aware of that danger. And so is the tradition, because the tradition lifts this up all the time. This, the tradition that comes after Torah lifts this up all the time, that there's a teaching here that's critical and it's very easy for us to forget. So exactly when we hear on the news that there's going to be a surge of immigration when the COVID, stuff is lifted, which didn't happen. It's been, if we're going to say it, it's been surging, right? With all of the issues and problems and challenges and dangers, that people live with and want to obviously escape. So, right. So Torah is warning us against, in a positive way, warning against that kind of dehumanization. All right. So associated with you shall be a participant from each tribe. We want to make sure everybody's counted. So you have somebody from each tribe making sure the count is accurate, right? So nobody says, oh, you underestimated the number, right? So nope. It's Jews. You're going to have somebody from each tribe there to check off, right? The numbers. Then we get the names, because again, how do you designate importance? You name people. You don't just say, and then there was the guy from God, and then there was that chick from Reuven, and you name them. So we get all of their names here. Nachshon ben Aminadav. Some of y'all may know that name, right? Remember Nachshon? Nachshon ben Aminadav. There he is. All of us who know the Midrashim about Nachshon jumping into the water. Okay. So we're going to go through all these names.
The Red Sea party.
That exactly. All the Midrashim about Nachshon as this guy.
Isn't it also they're naming this who their son of?
Huh?
They named their name and the son of their.
That's how you name someone in the Jewish tradition. There aren't family names. It's not like Smith, or Goldberg is more accurate. But right, it's you are who you are, son of your father here. It was changed now, of course.
With the boys. No bot, all Ben.
Here it's all Ben. Because it's only men who are going to be chosen for this role. But of course, I am Rachel bat Yechezkel v'Shendo. Right, so we are our Hebrew name, daughter of or son of our parents' names. And it's obviously an ancient tradition.
Into the house.
No worries. But you have your Hebrew name as well. Bat Avraham v'Sarah. Those are the elected of the assembly, the chieftains of their ancestral tribes. They are the heads of the contingents of Israel. So Moshe and Aaron took those participants who were designated by name, and on the first day of the second month, they convoked the whole company of fighters, as in parentheses, because that's what we're talking about, who were registered by the clans of their ancestral houses, the names of those aged 20 years and over being listed head by head. As God commanded Moses, so he recorded them, Bamidbar Sinai, in the wilderness of Sinai. Then we get the numbers of each of those tribes. Right. So we get in verse 21, Reuven 46:5, verse 23, 59:3. Right. You can see it goes on and on. It's going to go on how long? It's going to go on 12 times, obviously. Manasseh, Benjamin, Dan, Asher, Naphtali. Those are the enrollments recorded by Moses and Aaron and by the chieftains of Israel, who were 12 in number, one participant from each ancestral house. All the Israelite males aged 20 years and older enrolled by ancestral houses. All those in Israel who were able to bear arms came to 603,550. The Leviim, however, the Levites, were not recorded among them by their ancestral tribe. Why not? They are taking care of the Mishkan. They are not going to fight. They defend encroachment on the sancta. That's their job. It's not that they don't have weapons. It's that they use them against other Israelites. Do not on any account enroll the tribe of Levi or take a census of them with the Israelites. You shall put the Levites in charge of the tabernacle of the pact, all its furnishings and everything that pertains to it. They shall carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings, and they shall tend it, and they shall camp around the tabernacle. So they are supposed to be guarding all of the stuff of the Mishkan. Their hands are not free to fight, right? Their job is to protect the Mishkan. When the tabernacle is to set out, the Levites shall take it down. And when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up. Any outsider who encroaches shall be put to death. So that's their job, to protect and guard against encroachment. The Israelites shall encamp troop by troop, each man with his division and each under his standard. Okay, so troop by troop. So how much is a troop? Not sure. But each person with their division, each under their degel, each under their flag, or in this case, standard. I think it's going to play into our commentary, this word standard. And the Levites shall camp around the tabernacle of the pact, that wrath may not strike the Israelite community. The Levites shall stand guard around the tabernacle of the pact. The Israelites did accordingly, just as God had commanded Moses, so they did.
Does it say where the Kohanim are in all this?
They are part of the Levites. By Deber Adonai Moshe ve'el Aharon lemor, and God speaks to Moshe and Aharon. Remember when we talked about our sources? Notice before it was Moshe, now it's Moshe ve'Aharon. So right, these are the folks who want very much to put Aaron, right? The priestly writer is very interested in having Aaron be present for certain parts of these conversations. Okay, so remember, P is all over numbers. all over. God spoke to Moshe and Aaron saying, the Israelites shall camp. How are they going to camp? Ish al diglo. Each person with their degel, their flag, their standard. Ve'otot levet abotam, with the symbol of the house of their ancestors. Yachanu b'nei Yisrael. B'nei Israel, but children of Israel will camp. Mineged saviv le'ohel moed yachanu. Against and around the Ohel Moed, like facing the Keneged is facing. They will face the Ohel Moed and be encamped around it. Okay? All right. So each person, by their standard and by their ancestral house. So you have your own flag, and then you have the flag of your ancestral house, and then, of course, the flag of the tribe. Here's your visual as to what one artist imagines that looks like. Right? So you have this white tent, this white business. Only Levites can come in here, right? Only Levites can come into the territory around the Mishkan, inside that barrier. Only priests can go here, right? Only priests can go into the actual Mishkan, into the actual Ohel Moed. Only the high priest, only once a year, can go back here into the Holy of Holies, right? Okay. We clear? Kohanim, priests can go here. Levites can go in the outer courtyard to serve and to clean up and to take animal body parts away, right? Okay. Israelites, therefore, do not see anything that's happening in there. They don't, and this is how it worked in the Mesopotamian pagan world as well. The world of the cult was secret. No one saw what happened. You brought your offering, the priest took it and took it into the house of the god or goddess and did what they did with it. Nobody knew what that was. It is a radical then concept that we have the book of Leviticus. Everybody's supposed to know what goes on. That is completely counter to, right, how it worked in the ancient world.
Do we have any idea what the flags of the tribes look like? Are they related to the shields at all?
The shields?
That the ones that they wore with the gemstones in them? The breastplates.
Only the high priest wears the breastplate.
Right. But
only the high priest with 12 stones to represent the 12 tribes.
Okay. And what about the flags? Do we know anything about?
We do. We get a description of the banners. And yeah. All right. While we're waiting for Betsy to get the microphone, here's another rendering. As you can see, the altar, the laver, what's it called? The laver where you wash, right? Where the priest would wash. So here's the animal sacrifice altar. Here's the laver, and here's the Mishkan. Here's the tent. So inside the Mishkan itself, inside the tabernacle, is the menorah, the table with the showbread, the incense altar, right? And remember, we had that whole thing with Nadav and Avihu, right? That they were worried about the whole fire business, so they rushed in here to offer incense, but out of the Holy of Holies bursts forth, right, God's fire trying to get here to the animal altar. Remember? The animal altar is going to be lit by the fire of God. And so one interpretation is that the fire of God bursts out of here, out of the Holy of Holies, and goes to the animal altar and consumes Nadav and Avihu who are in the way. Right? Okay.
What is referred to as the tabernacle of the pact? Like, what does that mean?
The Ohel,
Why are they
the Ohel Moed,
Yeah, I mean, it's the translation is a tabernacle of the pact.
Ha'edut.
Yeah.
So that's another name for the Ohel Moed.
It's the same thing as the tent of meeting.
Yes. So there's scholarly debate about, is that a separate tent? Probably there are two traditions that there was this Mishkan, and that was kind of it. And then there's another tradition, probably a Mushite tradition, where there's a place outside of all of this that God speaks to Moses. Then there's a scholar who argues that the Mishkan was a placeholder where the Ohel Moed was inside. But we have references to outside the camp. Moshe talks to God in the Ohel Moed. So it's probably two variant traditions that we have. There's a wonderful book called Who Wrote the Bible? And he argues fairly convincingly that if you look at the dimensions of the Mishkan, it would house the Ohel Moed, or the temple. Maybe the temple that housed you. Anyway, that he thinks there's a historical kernel, of something there, a portable something that was the Ohel Moed. And possibly the Mishkan was made up, but we don't know. Mapitom. All right. So looking at this business of standards and banners, Ish al diglo ve'otot levet avotam yachanu b'nei Yisrael mineged saviv le'ohel moed yachanu. Okay, we just got this whole, right? This verse from Numbers 2:2. So now we're going to look, of course, at Rashi. What does Rashi say? Kol degel yiyeh lo ot mapat tzvu'ah tluya. So every person of the house of Israel we got is going to camp, blah, 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 blah. Each banner shall have a different sign, to your question, Judith. A piece of colored cloth hanging on it, the color of the one not being the same as the color of another. But the color of each tribe shall be like that of his stone that is fixed in the breastplate. And by this means, everybody will be able to recognize their banner. So there's no confusion. You don't have two purple banners. One's purple, one's orange, one's yellow, one's green. So everybody can clearly see their ancestral banner. The ancestral banner that Rashi's talking about is, of course, the tribal standard, the tribal flag, because there's 12 of them. Another explanation is by the signs, following the signs which their father, Avotam, the father of them, Av, father, Tam, theirs. So he's saying, don't read their ancestors' house, read their ancestor, their common ancestor, Yaakov, their father, who gave them, right? That gave them when they carried him out of Egypt, Genesis 50:12, and his sons did unto him exactly as he had commanded them. For he had commanded that Judah, Yisachar, and Zevulun should carry him, having their position at the east side of the Beer, Reuven, Shimon, and Gad at the south side, etc., as it is related in Tanchuma on this section. Okay, what is Rashi saying? Rashi is saying the way that they're arranged around the Mishkan is the way their father, literally their father, Jacob, arranged them when he was dying. That in Genesis 50, when he calls them to his deathbed, he tells them where to stand. And that arrangement is this arrangement. So how they stood around his deathbed is how they are camped around the Mishkan. Okay?
It's part of their death march.
Which is part of their death march. Exactly. All right. So Rashi is saying there's something important that has been passed down since the time of Yaakov that is still being enacted and lived into here. That this was familiar to these descendants from the time of Yaakov, and it attaches them not just to their ancestral house, like we're descendants of the big strapping guy, Gary. Like that, it's back to Jacob. So think about that. What does that do? For Rashi to relate it back to one common ancestor, Yaakov, that unites this diverse group. Because once you start camping people by tribes, you've got some, hey, wait a minute, how come they're closer to morning sun and we're stuck over here like schwitzing in the afternoon with a 4 o'clock sun pouring into our tents? Who decided that? Now immediately you have problems. Immediately you've got issues, unless you read it back into, like our tradition cleverly does, you read it back into, no. This is how their father arranged them around the bed. Everyone understands and knows this arrangement.
And that we're family.
And we are united as a family around the Mishkan. Exactly right. So I think it's a brilliant move by the Midrash, because Rashi's bringing the Midrash from Midrash Tanchuma. All right, here's another Midrash, quote from Beit Aaron, quoted in Iturei Torah. Each person under their standard with the banners of their family, every Jew must know and think that they are unique in the world, and there was never anyone exactly like them. If there were someone like them before, there would have been no need for you to come into the world. Every single person is someone new in the world, and it is their duty to improve their ways until all of Israel has attained perfection. Back to this idea that every single person counts, right? So yes, they're under the banners, under a collective banner, but every human being counts, and it's everybody's job to improve themselves until the entire people of Israel has attained perfection. So now I'm quoting someone talking about that from my Jewish learning. The commentator seems to be exploring the tension between each person finding his or her own personal standard, right? Back to the double, right, use of that, and also being grouped into a larger social unit under the banner of their family. This is a fundamental tension in contemporary Judaism. Each of us must develop our own personal journey of Jewish spirituality, and yet we are not alone in doing so. We are inheritors of a larger Jewish tradition with all of its teachings and customs and different interpretations. There's no such thing as a Jew who makes up a brand new Judaism for themselves, but rather we always exist as individuals in a creative covenantal relationship with the larger Jewish community. This creative dialectic between individual and community works in both ways. Not only does the individual have to find their own flag, right, their own standard within the larger Jewish tradition, but we must also recognize that the Jewish community is not complete, as it were, unless people are finding their own comfortable place within it. Well said. We don't make up Jewish practice. We reconstruct practices. We reform practices. We conserve some practices, right? But we don't make it up out of whole cloth. It's just not Jewish, right? To come up with a ritual, that has no grounding at all in the tradition. And that's both the beauty of it. And then you get all these different interpretations and all of these different opinions and all these midrashim. And now you've got stuff on the same page conflicting in terms of interpretations. This is Judaism, right? This is what it is. This is what we do. Honoring the individual and innovation, if you want to put it that way, uniqueness, and also that we do it within the broader relationship to the history of this people.
I have a question.
Yes, I vamped long enough for you to get the microphone.
I wonder about two new rituals that have come about in my time here, how they fit into this. One is the ritual of losing a child at birth or in utero. We have kind of invented something to have a service for an unborn child, and also the marriage ceremony for two people of the same sex. Would that be an adaptation of something we already had? Or
yeah, of weddings, right? So weddings, you just extend it. We don't do anything different for those gay people. Like we
or for us people who don't get married,
or for you people who don't get married. Well, we do something different for you.
Yeah,
we do something different for you, because the gay weddings are very similar to heterosexual weddings, You just change a little language,
Yeah.
but you don't do any of that Jewish stuff for someone who doesn't want to be married.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so
Right.
it's dafka. That's what distinguishes it. If you do the Jewish language, you're marrying.
Okay. So they are adaptations of what is,
Yes,
just extended.
correct. As is a funeral.
Yes.
We don't have funerals in Torah. There is no funeral.
Is there no practice delineated for funerals?
No, not here. It's rabbinic.
Okay.
All of the liturgy and stuff
Okay.
is rabbinic. And again, all we did was extend that for infants. It's nothing different. It's different in its approach of being inclusive and then applying it to new categories of people.
And there's a lot of room for extension and development.
Absolutely. We do now foot washings often at baby namings for girls because there's no physical ritual, thank God, parallel to circumcision, right? For girls, Baruch Hashem. And so we have this, ritual that people are really liking of foot washing, right? Right. And it was just a tradition in the ancient Near East to welcome people into your tent by washing their feet. And you committed to protecting any guest. This is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, by the way. This is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is why Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, because they took in guests and then were going to violate them. It is not about homosexuality. We'll get there. But that's what that's about. It's about they took guests in and you must defend guests with your own life. And they did the sacrilege. The highest heresy you could do was violate the safety of guests. And it's still this way in among the Bedouin and other semi-nomadic peoples, because everyone's going to need a place to stay eventually. If you journey out, you're going to need safety and shelter and a place to stay. And you have to be able to trust that place. And that's the culture, right? Is that it becomes sacrosanct, that you give up your own life to protect a guest. And so it's a lovely thing to say to a baby, welcome. And we are all here to protect you, in the ways that we can. All right. The narrative of the Israelite camps organization describes the creation of a human community striving to embody the sacred, integrate heaven and earth, make immanent that which is the transcendent, and translate the eternal into the here and now. Bamidbar, by locating the ark and the tabernacle at the center, illustrates the importance of orienting all aspect of any living organism toward its higher purpose in creation. This is Rabbi Pamela Wax. In this series, meaning her Torah commentary for that year, we have learned that the Hebrew word kavod, meaning glory, right? Respect, connotes weightiness, because kaved means heavy, and describes a palpable sense of the divine presence. The Mishkan signifies the midah of kavod, the awareness of sacred presence and purpose. And kavod's placement in the center represents its primacy in the design. The numbering and ordering of the individuals, clans, and tribes, as well as their equidistant placement encircling the Mishkan, indicates an intent to infuse the entire system with sacred weightiness. We can practice this in our lives by paying closer attention to the extent to which the individual elements of our lives, family, work, friendships, passions, leisure, mind, body, and spirit, are aligned with each other. Meaning there are distinct things, right, that go on in our lives, just like there are distinct clans. Hopefully they are all, right, in some kind of alignment, right, related to something bigger. We can notice whether these elements are infused with kavod, attention to others, and our own innate worth, and whether they are pointing towards our highest aspirations. So within us as well, there's this multiplicity, but it needs to be organized under one goal, which is lining those all up to work to getting us to be the people that we really want to be, which is, I think, a beautiful teaching. On one level, this is from Parshanut. This is Aviva Zornberg. On one level, flags celebrate a world in which each person recognizes their own tribe and affiliates with their genetically with their past. On another level, we might understand this affiliation as an inner sense of connection with the fathers, going back to Abraham. God said to Abraham, so shall be your seed. This should be read as a blessing, meaning may your seed resemble you. Ko means like. And so may your seed resemble you. The flag then comes to celebrate not a simple and proper tribal grouping, but the spiritual act of identification with the father, the patriarch Abraham, to be the seed of Abraham. So those, we were just talking about naming, right? So Lee, you are Bat Abraham. You are Bat Abraham B'Sarah, right? So to be the seed of Abraham, right? It's all exactly right. To be Bat Abraham is to remain connected, not to be alienated, to acknowledge one's inmost affiliation. It is a choice. Closing that, not sure what happened there. Don't think that belongs there. The flag then comes to celebrate not a simple, I just read that. It is a choice. On one level, flags celebrate a world in which this cutting and pasting for my Safari, I think, did not work very well this time. Yes, please.
So I want to know how I should handle myself differently next year when the Chabad comes to my door and offers their lovely matzah, because this year what happened, I accepted it as a fellow affiliated tribal community, and I thanked them at first because of that, recognition. I feel like, that we're talking about here, the separate tribes. And that was all lovely. And so my son came up behind me and they said, "Oh, hey, you little kid, have you wrapped tefillin today?" And I said, "You didn't ask me that. And that hurts my feelings." And they started to say, "Oh, well, there's different things of women." I said, "It hurts my feelings that you excluded me." But I'm thinking, and I was so proud of myself. Oh, yeah, I told him. But now I'm thinking maybe I wasn't being generous enough with you've got yours, I got mine, but so what's the plan for next year when they come to the door?
That's a good question, Laura. What do you think the plan is for next year?
I mean, I kind of want to say the same thing because it felt so. I think the plan for next year is to not be so angry when I tell them, but to say, I got to share with you that in my Judaism,
women late tefillin.
I can do all of that. And just so you know, it's great. You do you,
Mm-hmm.
but here's how it works in our house. So have a great day.
Beautiful.
And the matzah was stale, by the way.
But yeah. Probably it wasn't stale. It was shmura matzah. That's how it tastes. That's how it tastes. Yes. Shmura matzah is it's like eating the box. So I'd rather eat the box.
And I'll have a box ready for them.
Yeah. Here's the good matzah. You can say, here, have you tried gluten-free potato matzah? It rocks. It's like a sheet of potato chips. It is awesome. It is awesome. It is awesome. No, you buy it. It's gluten-free matzah. So it's made with potato flour. It tastes like a great big potato chip. It's awesome.
That might be the second best thing I learned today.
All right. So one should express a wish not to be alienated from the ancestors, that one's life should have a nigi'ah, a touch, some contact with their lives. In the same way, the signs, the insignia on the flags express a yearning that one's life bears some intimation, some fleeting glimpse of affinity with their lives. This is the leap, the occasional leaf amim flash of desire that connects one with one's roots. Very Aviva Zornberg. That we should want a nigi'ah, as opposed to how you are used to hearing nigi'ah, how I grew up hearing nigi'ah, touching, no touching, right? Boys and girls weren't allowed to touch in the yeshiva that I went to, which I have to say was actually a kind of relief. I do have to say there was some relief in being a teenage girl, knowing nobody could touch me but other girls. Nagia. So but there's a good Nagia, right? That Aviva Zornberg's pointing out. We should want our lives to have some Nagia, some touching on the lives of the ancestors. And of course, you all know that I don't descend from this people, right? So it's not for me in any sense biological. In any sense, for me, this is about, we should want our lives to touch the lives of the ancestors, like who I don't even believe really existed. Right. So, but there were people back then who gave us this and who kept reading into this enough gorgeousness that we're sitting here in 2023. And that's why we're here. And I think it's a beautiful interpretation that we should want our lives to touch somehow, right? The lives of those, the stories of those before us. Now, it also brings up the fact that flags can be about war, right? This is a military endeavor. And it can be, in these interpretations that we've just been reading, it can be about love, right? So it gets traced back to the beloved father. This is not just a matter of territory or pride. These flags also represent a profound connection to home and tradition and even love. There is a tension inherent in any form of nationalism. On the one hand, when masses of people are mobilized together through shared ethnic identity, there's always a great danger of their coming to violence. But on the other hand, through these tribe-like national affiliations, we are able to experience a sense of belonging in our society as if it were our own family. Nations can breed hatred, but they can also cultivate love. Flags can be symbols of aggression or of affection. And just in case you doubt, he brings us sources. We only see degel used not so much in Torah, but where do we see it next? We see it in Psalms. And in Psalms, may we shout for in your victory, arrayed by, right? Need gol yimale. So arrayed by standards, by flags in the name of our God, meaning war. We won. Victory. We're under our flags. Yay, team. We're the best. But if you look at Song of Songs, he brought me to the banquet room and his banner of love was over me. That's not talking about war. That's not talking about, right? My beloved is clear-skinned and ruddy, preeminent among 10,000, but the word is dagul among 10,000. Preeminent, dagul, from flag, degel, right? So is standy outy, I guess this is the correct translation, right? But you can see in the Song of Songs, and his Vidiglo alai ahava, and his flag was draped over me. Okay. Kind of opposite of war, right? This is absolutely a indication of love. Song of Songs is nothing but erotic poetry. So a flag can be a marker of love or the banner of war. They might go either way. In fact, and this is our guy from Parshanut. In fact, the rest of the book of Numbers will continue to play out this tension. Through their long desert journey, they will be learning what it means to be a nation, the good, the bad, and the sometimes very ugly. Just like today, which is why I brought you that source, because I think this is one of the major challenges that we are seeing in the age that we're living in. There have always been nations, obviously. We're going back to biblical texts. Living in an age where nationalism was the organizing principle, we're still living with a lot of the consequences of that, right? Like, so, and yeah, think what a swastika flag does to us, right? It is very, intense. I mean, at least for me, like, it just triggers so much because that flag has meaning. And we're still living. And again, I know this has always been human history, but I think there is a particular kind of ugliness in the age of nationalism that we've seen that is just, we're still dealing with the fallout, of it. Where whose borders are where and who encroaches on whose borders. And again, I know this is human nature. I know that there's something about, the nationalism, the chest thumping nationalism that we've seen in the, in these last centuries that is really distressing, right? And like, when are we going to get it that we're one world community, and we see it with climate change and the destruction, of the ecosystem is that, like, hello, like it belongs to everybody. Like, so when are we going to figure it out that we're all, evolved children of this planet? We're all creatures of the planet. Like, it's like, and I know it sounds so utopian and so naive. I don't mean it to. I mean, I'm hoping we are coming out of some of the incredible saber rattling nationalism. It's like, and being able to identify with different groups as groups. I love being American. I love America. I am a patriot. It doesn't mean I need to denigrate somebody else from some other country with another culture and another language and another, and just when are we gonna get it? I'm hoping we're coming out of this, really militaristic, nationalistic phase of human experimentation, and hopefully, God willing, moving towards some more of what we've been talking about here, that understanding that each group, each people, each whatever has its own culture and its own history and its own traditions and its own goals and ambitions. And sometimes that's going to get clashy. I get it, but we can work it through. Like, and so this parsha really made me hyper aware of, oh yeah, it can go either way.
Isn't that a part of our prayer for Israel? That the lion shall lie down with the lamb and there will be war no more. It's part of the prayer for Israel, that Israel can be a symbol of the peace that we seek for all people.
Yes.
But
yes.
there's a but about that. If you look at today's LA Times, you see, unfortunately, with a lot of Israeli flags, standards, behavior that you just wish wasn't there.
Correct. And Bob Ettinger is talking. I couldn't agree more, Bob. And it's very distressing. I was exactly going to say something like, that's why I paused after Judah's comment, because it's like, yeah, that's the prayer for Israel. And Israel's like any other country. And right now is just as polarized as any other country. And unfortunately has just as much icky, ugly disgustingness happening as anywhere else. It's unfortunately not even close to fulfilling the words of the prophet. And then to be clear, the words of the prophet are about the Messianic age. That's not about, Israel. Now you see the flags that were in this last march on Yom Yerushalayim, on Jerusalem Day, celebrating the taking back of Jerusalem in 1967. The flags that were being waved were ultra nationalist, right wing, hateful symbols. So when I see those flags, what they stand for, and then, like you said, even literally a pride flag. The rainbow flag is just about, yay, we're all different and we're different in a certain way. And that brings us together. And we keep adding to that alphabet. And so looking all around the country, you can see other flags
that are showing a lot of the same thoughts or approaches that are negative.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's not just.
No, 100%. And I misspoke if I meant to say it's worse in Israel. Nationalist flags here are just as disgusting.
On that at the moment here at this moment, but in just thinking about it, wide range. Everybody.
Right. And it's why I think it's why it was so upsetting for those of us watching on January 6th, because it was exactly this tension between those of us who are patriots and love this country. I'm not saying the ultranationalists are not patriots, God forbid. I don't want to misspeak, but those of us who are patriots and love this country and love everything about what democracy stands for, however messy it is, however complicated. And yeah, we got to keep working on it for sure. But the Capitol is like a symbol of all different interests coming together to try to figure this mess out. those of us who love that as a national symbol saw people carrying American flags, desecrating that and looking to hang people whose job it was to be in there because we sent them there. That's what democracy is. And I think that's why it was so terribly upsetting, is it's exactly, you saw exactly the clash of what the same symbol can mean. The American flag over the Capitol and the American flags waving as people came in to destroy the democratic process.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.